The 3764 Elvis Presley Boulevard. Hit it, Elvis. You got me.
So what we're doing here at Elvis Back on Tour is a new feature that we have where we're going to interview folks that have actually seen Elvis in concert and let them share with us their story of what it was like to actually see Elvis in concert. So tonight we have Ed Williams, who actually seen Elvis in concert 4 times in Macon, Georgia at the Coliseum. And so I want to introduce Ed to you right now. And Ed, tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of where you're from, and just tell us a little bit about Macon, if you will, Macon, Georgia.
Okay, listen, guys, I really appreciate it. I started as a big fan, and to get to be interviewed is really an honor. I've enjoyed your segments. Just a little bit real quickly, I grew up in the large metropolitan area of Juliet, Georgia. Its one claim to fame, it was where the movie Fried Green Tomatoes was filmed. It was actually, the location filming was done there. Went to school there, elementary, middle, high school. I got a business degree at Georgia College and State University, and I've lived in Macon, Georgia since 81.
Okay.
My professional experience is mostly I worked in manufacturing and human resources. So I've negotiated contracts and wrote policies and dealt with issues, hired, that kind of thing. But at age 2, my mother noted in my baby book that I'd gotten her 45 of Jerry Lee Lewis doing Great Balls of Fire, and learned to operate her record player, and that she said she was sick of the song even though she loved it, but I played it so much. And she had the Elvis 45s, had a number of them. So I literally grew up on Elvis Presley, loved Elvis. When in 72, when Elvis came to Macon the first time, my father worked at Southern Natural Gas, and he had a friend that was in the Exchange Club in Macon. The big deal about that was they handled, like they were ushers at the shows and events there. They knew what was coming, and months before Elvis came, my dad's friend whispered in his ear and said, "We're not supposed to say a lot about this, but Elvis Presley is coming." My dad came home, and I was like, I must have asked him questions for 20 minutes. And he was like, "Look, I don't know when he's coming or what," but he knew that it was going to be months down the road, but he was coming. Back then, the only way you could buy tickets was to either stand in line at the box office, right, or you could do a mail order. Well, we're living in Juliet, which is about 25 miles from Macon, but back then that would have been like me going to England. That was like a big deal to make a little trip like that.
Right.
So I sent a mail order in 6 months before the concert date. Weeks later, the tickets show up, and I have 2 10th row from the front center seats. At that concert, I was literally 25 feet from Elvis. And I was on an aisle, so I didn't have to look over people or anything like that. I won't get ahead of it, but I always, you love your dad, but my dad truly set me up for success with that.
Right. So I just want to talk to you a little bit about the lead up to the show. So how old were you then, Ed, when you saw him in 72?
I was 16. It was the first real concert I ever went to in my life.
Okay.
And I'll say this for context. Now I'm 64.
Okay.
Gone to a ton of concerts and seen some great acts. But it just kind of boggles me to think the first concert I went to is forever the best concert.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. We've heard that before. I want to capture the excitement, if you will. And anytime we've ever talked to somebody that's actually seen Elvis in concert, I've always noted that it seems like when they start talking about that after it's been, 45, 50 years, I see the excitement can still build up in the people when we talk to them about it, because it was almost like it was yesterday. So take us back to that day. We're going back to 1972, April of 72. Elvis is he's in a long tour here. He's starting to wind it down now. So take us back to that. Take us back to that day where you get to the Coliseum, you enter in. Just kind of walk us through, and then I want to grab you right at the minute. I want to capture, and we're going to kind of slow down the interview because I want to capture when you hear the opening riff and Elvis comes out, and I want you to slow it way down, and I want you to talk about the flash cubes, because I know everybody talks about the flash cubes. So let's go. Go ahead.
Okay. One thing that set Elvis concerts apart for years, people dressed up pretty nice to go see Elvis. I noticed it wasn't uncommon to see a few suits, at the very least, like guys are wearing slacks and pretty nice shirts. Ladies look nice. I mean, I can remember the tickets were tiered. They were $10, $7.50, and $5. A $10 ticket in 1972 was a lot of money to go to a concert. But you're going to see Elvis. If I was going to sell getting that money from my parents, it would be Elvis Presley, and they both loved Elvis. So that kind of opened the doors. So you're walking in, there are cars and people as far as you can see. And I'm a little rural country kid that probably went to church with 20 people, and school was, classes were small. And so, at first you're just kind of gawking and looking around. But they were very efficient. There were a lot of ushers. We were taken right to our seats. And when I sat down, I can remember two things. First off, giving silent thanks to my dad for finding out about this, because I could tell I was in a good spot. And the other thing I noticed is on the end of the row, now I always took, for those 4 concerts, I never took a woman to an Elvis concert, because I knew that's just shooting yourself right between the eyes. I mean, no woman is even going to know you exist, and you're going to pay all that money and spend that time, just to get your butt kicked. Right. So I was always like, get guys. And trade it off. Get guys that are Elvis fans, and the trade-off is you fight the cars, you fight the crowd, right. And then your reward is you get to see Elvis. And I loved Elvis, and I wanted to focus. I didn't want to be talking trash or crap or, acting like I gave a damn, when the only thing I cared about was watching Elvis Presley.
Right.
Guys, the other thing I noticed on the row I was on, there were probably like 20 seats, and my uncle and I are on one end, and I noticed on the other end there were these 2 pretty old ladies. I mean, they had to be mid-70s or above, barely moved. I remember, even as exciting as it was, that I would keep kind of glancing at them just to note signs of life. And I promise this will make sense. It won't make sense when I'm telling you this now, but it'll make sense a little bit. Whoever organized these concerts was a psychological genius, because you're there to see Elvis Presley. And don't get me wrong, he had great musicians, backup singer. Everyone knows about J.D. Sumner and the Stamps. They were there. Sweet Inspirations were there. Kathy Westmoreland was there. The TCB Band, Joe Gershow and his orchestra. I mean, it was powerful. If you walked in and looked at just the stage setup alone, you would know that somebody pretty big in the music business was about to be doing some business, because it was one thing Elvis, and I've noticed over the years, I've had friends that have talked about like tribute artists and people like that. Right. But the one thing that kills them is nobody can match like that accompaniment. I mean, it was just extremely powerful. What they did, J.D. Sumner and the Stamps come out, the Sweet Inspirations come out, and they both do 20, 25-minute sets, and they're good, and you clap, and you're into it, but it's like your mind the whole time. And I'm just telling you, me at age 16, I was like, dear God, please let these people leave. I know they're good, but dang it, you know, it's kind of time for the main event here. I've only waited 16 years, you know. So when Jackie Kane comes out and does his riff, by the time, and I mean, he got polite applause, but by the time that was done, and I think they were doing this on purpose, anytime anyone mentioned the word Elvis along the way, place popped.
Wow.
I mean, you know, and so Jackie Kane, he leaves the stage. I think this guy, his name was Al. I can't remember what his last name was, but he was the announcer. He walks up. He was famous for at the end, Elvis has left the building. He walks up to the mic, and by God, the screams and the cries and the hollers, and he walks up to the mic and he goes, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for intermission. And you can hear the groans all across the building. So they raise the lights up. People go to, you know, the bathroom, eat. They hawked a lot of souvenirs. Okay. You would hear constant stuff about programs. They had these big posters, just all kind of things. There were banners, and I wish I could have figured out how to get one. And as y'all are out, I don't know if this is possible. They would put these banners across the stage. It was like, Elvis in concert, hear him on RCA Victor records and tapes. It would be so cool to have one of those because they just had them kind of lined across the stage. So 20, 25 minutes goes by, and these two little old ladies I was telling you about earlier, they're still in a near-death pose on the end. They haven't moved much. People are in a little clump, you know, talking to each other. All of a sudden, Al comes up to the microphone and goes, ladies and gentlemen, we can't start the second half of tonight's concert until everyone returns to their seats. Those two old women who had been there frozen the entire time both shot up out of their chairs. And I remember it caught me, and they looked at a group of people next to them, and I'm not going to quote it verbatim because I know y'all run a clean show here, but they were like, get your butt back in these seats, Elvis is coming. And I'm telling you, folks fanned out after the announcer had made, you know, that statement about everybody returning to their seat. It probably was no more than 2 minutes. And just to kind of picture this in your heads, the Coliseum at that time could hold about 11,000 people. So, you know, it's a pretty big place. The lights just suddenly go out. Not a light in the place. It's dark. All of a sudden, this needle point neon blue spot hits the base of Ronnie Tutt's drum kit. It's like right toward the bottom of it, and the effect was it was like that light just kind of exploded out. And they started that, you know, and I'm not very musical, but I'm going to do the best I can, but it was like, I'm not trying to be sacrilegious at all, but you would have just about thought the good Lord was about to make an appearance. I mean, it was like this wall of sound, and all of a sudden, Ronnie Tutt, and he looked kind of like a big old bear, but he had kind of long hair down to his shoulders and a beard. All of a sudden, he just like, and I mean, it was deep and hard, and it was like as angelic as the theme was. buddy, this was like you had just jumped from religion to hell, and hell was going to be a fun trip. And so they hit the vamp and the horns in the orchestra. This is no exaggeration. I was about to crap in my pants. It was so exciting. And the lights, the flash bulbs, the Instamatics, and that was the camera of the year. The Instamatics were already starting to pop. It was like fireflies at night. You're just seeing this, but you didn't look at it too much because I'm kind of, I'm there to see Elvis and the focus. The way, and I don't know if this is where my seating was or just fade or whatever, but you did get kind of a long look, like here's a small figure and it gets bigger and he kind of comes up. It literally was like he just came up.
Right.
And all of a sudden you're looking there and he is materialized wearing this white jumpsuit with a Napoleonic collar. And I am not saying this to exaggerate because I want your audience to get as clear a picture as you can. I was just friggin' blown away. It was just like, my God, this is Elvis Presley.
Right.
This is why people are the way they are. And when he materialized, before he even walked around, and he walked back and forth, he went to the end and he came back and then he went over to Charlie Hodge. That place was lit. You could hear those Instamatic cameras clicking and going off, bulbs all over the place, screaming, people. It was like he had this visceral effect. And I was like, even at that age, I was like, whoever planned this is not getting paid enough money. I mean, it was just spectacular.
Right.
So he walks across the stage, and he walked fairly slowly. It was like, I think he was trying to kind of give everybody a look. And he walked to the other side, which he started, he went to my left, far to the left, and far to the right, and those two old ladies were on their feet. It was like death had left and life had returned. They were into it then. And it was like he walks over and Charlie Hodge gives him his guitar. He kind of bent down and he put the guitar on him and they talked a little bit. And he walked up to the mic. Now, this show was different than the other three. He actually sang That's All Right as his first number, where the 75, 6, and 7 shows were C.C. Ryder.
Right.
I'll say this, too, and I don't know this either here nor there. He had to be the best-looking guy I've ever seen in my life. I know we talked a little bit about charisma.
Right.
This is being as straight as I can be. Charisma, in Webster's dictionary, what they ought to do is just put the word charisma and stick Elvis's picture next to it. Because there will never be anybody that had going on with an audience what Elvis Presley did. So he knocks out That's All Right, and he's in the stance. And, of course, when he even made the slightest move, the women in there just, went crazy or whatever. One thing I noticed in the show, too, that was different than the other three, it was pretty much straight music, very little between the songs. I mean, he would talk, but it was like he was kind of serious. He was focused. He was doing his best to put on a good show. And I always thought that was some of Elvis's appeal, that on the one hand, you had this charismatic super performer, but he was actually kind of a shy guy.
Yeah.
In between the songs, you could tell sometimes he would get voice would get a little low, where it was almost like he was kind of talking a little lower than he should. But this show was musical. If you wanted to musically get the closest to it, you possibly could. This was April 15th of 72. I think in June of 72 was when he went to Madison Square Garden.
Right.
That Elvis Live from Madison Square Garden is virtually the identical set list to what he did in Macon. Okay. And I love that album to this day because it was like getting kind of a clone of that concert.
Okay.
So the planning, I know he did That's All Right. He did Proud Mary. Then he kind of backed it up. And it was funny. It wasn't his hit, but people really loved it. I think he went into Never Been Dismayed.
Right.
And after like Proud Mary and J.D. Sumner, and they had that going on, and then prior to that, That's All Right, it was literally the most special performance I ever attended in my life. I mean, to this day, if I had a dime for every person over the years that was like, God, I wish I'd seen him, or I had the chance, but I turned it down, God, I wish I'd gone. You know, it was a happening. Another thing I want to bring up, I think he sang an American Trilogy at 3 of the 4 shows. The very last show, I don't think he sang that. Those crowds could be raucous with the rock and roll, be kind of ooh and on with the ballads. Anytime he went into an American Trilogy, you could have heard a pin drop. I mean, it was like reverence when he started that. He was never off key. I don't think you can listen to all of his live stuff. When I've watched interviews they've done with musicians and all that talk about him, he just had this natural gift, and he just went with the music. But it was a very professional, you could tell he gave it everything he had. He was glad to see the audience. You know, at one point they brought up the lights, and he was like, you know, now you've seen us, I want to take a look at you.
Right.
And the lights all come up. And then he launched into Funny How Time Slips Away, which was perfect for that, because, you know, it's like, well, hello there. It's been a long, long time. And so, and folks just ate that up.
Right.
The interesting thing, and there's a lot more I could say about that concert. At the end of it, we didn't know the opening, we didn't know what the close was going to be. So he does, you know, Can't Help Falling in Love. And when he finishes, he drops down to one knee and he spreads his cape out. And I mean, it's like everybody in that place stood up. People were crying, people were applauding, people were but we didn't know he was about to leave. Because, you know, standard concert, you think it's going to come back, there'll be an encore.
Right.
He walks across the stage 2 or 3 times, cape spread out, gets back to the middle, drops to one knee one more time, and then just kind of vanishes straight down a few steps, and he's gone. They must have played that vamp for another 45 seconds to a minute. At the end of that was when you got the famous, ladies and gentlemen, Elvis has left the building. I figured out after that, they did that, I'm guessing, for people to think he might come back, but to buy him time, because in Macon, and y'all seen the building.
Right.
I think they had that limo pretty well pulled in behind the stage, and it was like off a few steps in and gone. And they needed to, because one of the things at the subsequent concerts, when people realized, when he started doing Can't Help Falling in Love, everyone knew that was it. And it's a miracle people didn't get killed, because people would lean so far over the railings and stuff.
Right.
But that one was amazing. The introduction, the way he performed the music, the lighting and staging, and it was a good mix of songs. You get some upbeat songs, like he did some of the old ones, like All Shook Up, Hound Dog, Teddy Bear, and then he even sang at that one, The Impossible Dream, which was not, you know, something he was noted for, but, you know, how he wore that out, that was like a beautiful song. I always found that he did one or two that you just didn't expect him to do. Right. And that was always like a real treat. So Very good musically. He sang a lot of different songs. Some of the older ones you might get 30 seconds or 45, or they put them in a medley or something like that. I think they did Teddy Bear and Don't Be Cruel or something, together and kind of seg from one into the other. But very focused on the music, very focused on the performance. The band was serious, the backup singers. As the later shows occurred, he got more playful, I guess you would call it. But this one was, I'm here to sing and rock and roll. Y'all are here to listen, enjoy that. Just brilliant show.
Give us your opinion on if you took 72, 75, 76, and 77, give us your pick on which show that you would love to see again. Like, what was your favorite? If you could go again to any one of those shows, which one would it be?
Oh, the first one.
Okay.
The first one, easily.
Okay.
Probably the best music, highest level of excitement, planning of the concert was good. They all seemed really fun. I mean, you want people to enjoy themselves, and they were, but I think they were just getting out on the road and getting in front of like arena-type audiences and all. And I think it was real important. I got the feeling, I didn't obviously know them or talk to them, but the feeling I got, it was very important to them that they put on a good presentation. It was important to him because Elvis has cultural significance worldwide, but in the South, Elvis has even greater cultural significance.
Okay.
So, and I think they kind of realized that. I mean, it wasn't like you were going to see, oh, here's Freddie Bob Smith with the number one hit in the country, his first hit. He's out here to do that. I mean, this is like Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll.
Right.
First concert was the best one. The last one had some musical moments, but was sad. It was 2.5 months before he died. He was obviously in not real good shape, but he still had moments where he just wore it out. He could still sing. The second one, the 75 one, was the best rock and roll concert.
Okay.
Actually. He did Chuck Berry, like Promised Land. I always loved that song. It is my single favorite up-tempo Elvis song. I could listen to him sing that 50 times in a row. But the first one was clearly overall the best concert, and maybe just the impact of it being the first concert.
Okay.
That had a lot to do with that.
What I want to ask you is, you saw him in 72 in April, so he was a powerhouse, just a phenomenal powerhouse, charisma, unbelievable, electricity, off the charts. But let's fast forward now to 77. You see him there in June, well, I believe it was June 1st of 77, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So a lot's changed in his life. But as we've spoken in these interviews before, and like I say, I never saw him, but after listening to a lot of his concerts, I've always felt that vocally he was just like a fine wine. He just aged so beautifully vocally. So we've already talked about 72. We talked about him singing Impossible Dream in 72. Now fast forward, we're 2.5 months out prior to his death. Talk about the song, whatever song that it was that he sang on June 1st, 77. Talk about how he sounded vocally on that song.
Let me kind of answer it this way. There was a song he sang called Fairy Tale, and it's not a big dramatic hit song, but it's not easy, and it was effortless. I mean, he just tossed this out like you could tell he could have done that in his sleep. Vocally, actually, toward the end, he was probably, I tend to agree with you, but that was the closest I ever came to crying at any concert, because it was almost like you've got this solitary figure, because the lights and all are all on him, and everybody's depending on him. He's the show. And I mean, it's like he gave you everything he had. And that, to me, was just powerful. At that point, he could have phoned it in long ago. They could have brought him out, do a few numbers, just kind of ate what he did and made a lot of money. But he was out there for over an hour. It was just quite moving. And always, when Elvis would leave the stage, every time, I would always in the back of my mind just kind of be like, thanks for, I thank God, like, thank you for giving me this chance.
Right.
And I never did that at any other concert for anybody else. But it was like, it was a privilege. The only thing was back then, guys, we didn't really realize what we were seeing or the impact or what he was going to be. But I'm just so thankful. I know I was very lucky and very fortunate to get to do that. So if any of this, what y'all are doing, for me, it brought back, I loved your Macon clip. I've watched many of the other locations, and it's kind of touching. I mean, one, that you care enough to do it. Right. Number two, man, it brings back memories. Even the ones that aren't about Macon, I've watched, and certain things would kind of trigger, memories. Like, I'm just very grateful. I really appreciate what y'all are doing, because it means a lot.
Well, that means a lot to us that you say that, because I will tell you, what we do is from the heart. A lot of what we do is to say thank you to Elvis for just entertaining the world for the way he did. And I always felt like he gave so much more than he ever got back. That's just my feelings. I just feel like he just he drained himself, I think.
It was how I got started your series. I saw the Macon thing, and I was like, oh, man, I got to watch this. Right. And then it was cool at the end. You named your dog Macon. I thought that was cool. But Elvis was like more than just a performer. Elvis kind of reached inside you, and it's like you loved him. You were pulling for him. Even at the end, it was like you worried about him, and you wanted it to be good, and you wanted things to work out okay. But I think, and I mean, I don't know, obviously, but I think Elvis gave everything he had, and I think Elvis just got kind of tired of being Elvis.
I agree.
That would be kind of a tough job for anybody.
So you definitely have great memories of '72. They're very vivid in your mind. Is '76, was that show? Do you have any memories of that show?
I remember he did I Love Gordon Lightfoot, and I think he sang Early Morning Rain in that concert. It's a great song, and Elvis, it was just kind of effortless with him. He wore an outfit that was like a jumpsuit, but the sleeves were ruffled. Yeah. There were like kind of ruffled sleeves on that outfit. I guess the most memorable single thing about that, the early part when the opening and they brought him out, I think if I remember right, that was the first time when he did CC Rider and he got toward the end of it, he would get to this part where he'd go 2, and he'd move a leg and go 2. Right. And then 3, and on 4, they all vamped it out, and he finished off the song. If I remember right, I think he kind of played the band a little bit. He 2'd it a bunch and 3'd it, and then they brought that home. But I want to think that he sang It's Now or Never. It might have been, it was either 76 or 77, where he did O Sole Mio. He had one of the guys, I think it was Cheryl Nielsen or whatever, sang that. And then Elvis sang into It's Now or Never. That was a very powerful moment. 76 was hard for me. I was 46 rows back. So your level behind 45 rows. So a lot of that concert, it was almost like you're trying to just kind of, get a peek between a lot of people. But it was good musically. He brought the house down more than once. At that point, he was very comfortable with his band. I mean, very comfortable. I mean, he would be liable to look at one of them and say, do so-and-so or play this. In fact, I think that was the first one where he kind of, when he introduced the members, he kind of let them all do a little riff or a little playing or whatever. Normally he would just introduce, and maybe Ronnie Tutt would give it a little bit, do a little solo or something. But this one, if I remember it right, he pretty much went around the horn, and all those, the greatly talented people in that band played.
Can you show him footage?
Yeah, so I was able to find on YouTube, we found some fan shot footage of 76 and 77. So we'll try and share the screen with you so you can see it. We'll do 76 first. And I'll play like 30 seconds, 45 seconds of it. And as you're watching it, just kind of share some thoughts from kind of what you remember, and then we'll put that in the video. So let me.
Now, does this look about right?
Yeah, that's the outfit, because you can see the ruffled sleeves. I remember his hair was very combed back. He was going to walk, and he always went to that side. To like your left, and then came to the other. This show was an excellent show. I don't think there was one song in it that he didn't deliver well. He still looked, he looked good. But oh man, it brings back a lot of memories.
So now we'll do 77. I think 77's a little better footage, but this is 77.
All right, to kind of talk us through here a little bit, and tell us kind of your initial thoughts if you recall this right here, Ed.
Okay, yes, sir. Him coming out, I definitely remember that. You would have to be blind and dead not to remember an Elvis entrance. You'll notice he walks to the other side of the stage. That was a little bit different. Obviously it looks a little different, but the place, he got as big a pop and all the adulation that you would expect from an Elvis concert. He actually, at this one, was probably more relaxed than at any of them. He obviously didn't feel good, but
right.
He was relaxed. He comes up to the microphone. When the first word got out of his mouth, of course, the place would pop all over again. But I want to say, I think right after that, he went to I Got a Woman and Amen. But it was still, to y'all's point earlier, musically, he still had it.
Yeah, absolutely.
There was two. I want to say this, and not to broach into this too deeply, but I will say this. There was a lot of audience conversation expressing concern about Elvis.
Right.
Just be aware that was very different from the other shows. I think, to y'all's point earlier, people thought he was working too hard, and that couldn't have been an easy life. But I will mention that because there was a good bit of discussion about that.
Yeah, we've often talked to people, like, when we're on our tours, and we talk to people in these buildings and things like that. And it's pretty much the belief of most of the people that we talk to that knew him, worked for him, saw him, when he passed through on tour and things like that in these different cities, that, he was wore out. He was just wore out. He was tired. And to your point earlier, I think that being Elvis came with a very high price tag, and I think he just got to the point where it got tough for him to pay that bill every year, So.
Too, guys, I don't know, I've just always felt that way. He did enough. Right. If you look at the people he helped, the people he made happy. You know, he brought a lot of joy and goodwill. I do want to say this, and years ago I did a little writing, and I'm not going to get into all that except for the fact that I had a literary agent. And my literary agent at the time was representing a lady that had written a book about the Memphis Mafia. My birthday is in June, and I think this was 1999. I was cutting grass, and my little daughter Allison runs out and goes, Dad, there's somebody on the phone that wants to talk to you. And I'd always told my kids when I was cutting grass, you don't come out here, you know, the mower can sling rocks or whatever. I told Allison, you need to get in the house. And she looked at me and said, Dad, he said his name was Marty Lacker, and you would want to talk to him. I just let go of the lawnmower and walked in the house. And I got on the phone, and Mr. Lacker was like, Ed? I said, yeah. I said, this is Marty Lacker. And he told me that he had a friend that had told him about me. And I'm not going to go into all of it. And he told me a lot of Elvis stories, but I do want to tell people the end of the conversation. At that point, I mean, I loved Elvis, and it bothered me, the stuff that came out after he died. And, you know, I've hardly been a saint in my lifetime, so I would be the last person to point, because none of us could imagine what living a life like that would have been like. So I would have been the last person. But you do have this little piece in the back of your mind, like, you know, God, I love this guy more than anything. Was it really worth all the effort and emotion, or, you know, and he asked me at the end of the conversation, Ed, do you have any questions? And I asked him, I said, Mr. Lacker, I don't know how to ask, but I just want to know that, and he stopped me, and he was like, Ed, he said, Elvis was faced with things that you or I could never imagine. But he said, he was a good man. He loved people. He brought happiness to millions of people. He said, I'm just going to tell you, you certainly haven't wasted your time caring about Elvis Presley. And that would pretty well, you know, sum it up for me.
Well said, Ed. That right there will make the whole video worthwhile. What you just said right there, heartfelt. We love talking to people that talk from the heart, and that couldn't have been said any better than what you just did. So we appreciate that.
See, I just want people to hear that, because I know with all that, but my God, you know, we just need to thank God we had him, and that he did the things that he did. And thank God for people like y'all that, because think about it. We are talking about a concert. I'm 64 years old. We're talking about a concert I attended when I was 16. I mean, there is no entertainer walking the face of the earth today that I think 20 years from now they'll be talking about.
Right.
We are sitting here now, that impact. I can talk to y'all about those concerts, and there's still the goosebumps, and there's still the emotion. He had a gift to connect with people that I couldn't even begin to describe. Charisma, that should have been his middle name.
Right. I think that in our years of following Elvis, at least in my years of following Elvis, and I think Michael will probably agree, is that we tend to put people like that on some kind of perfect pedestal. And it's unfair because, as we all know, there are no perfect people. And I think that really was tough on him, because he tried to be that person that we all wanted him to be. And any time that he slipped on that, it was magnified. And that's got to be hard on a person, because there's no perfect people out there. So that's kind of our thought for the day.
Well, Libby, I'll say one more thing, and this is kind of a little more upbeat. Y'all might get a little bit of a kick out of this, but when Elvis came to Macon the first time, of course, there was all kind of PR, newspaper articles, TV. I mean, you can only imagine. And one morning, my mom and dad and my brother and I were eating breakfast. And my dad is reading the paper, and he kind of tended to read parts out loud that he found interesting. Big article about Elvis coming to town. And they mentioned in the article that Elvis had more security than the President of the United States. And so my dad, I always called him Ed Jr. Ed Jr. reads that out loud to my mom, pulls the paper down and looks over at her, and he says, "Well, hell, Barbara, he's more valuable." So, it's like, and who could dispute it? You know,
That's
I mean,
right.
I think Elvis was one of those people. You knew this, and I didn't remember the lady's name, but there was a lady in the Sweet Inspirations that said that Elvis was an angel, and he was. He was. I've watched and listened to performers, and I just, it was just a privilege.
Yeah. Well, Ed, I want to say that it's been a privilege speaking with you, somebody that saw him 4 times in concert in Macon at the Coliseum. We cannot thank you enough for your time. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you, getting to know you. We got to know you a little bit in that pre-interview that we did the other night. We consider you a true friend, and when we come back down to Macon, we're going to bang on your door and visit with you for a while.
Guys, let me tell you something. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I didn't mean to get too emotional toward the end, but people, I mean, the best people are the people that kind of do something to you inside, and I think Elvis did that to a lot of people. Yeah. I took this real seriously because I got to thinking, I'm like, maybe there are not a lot of people that saw him that many times, and tried to do the best I could. I mean, there was a lot. I mean, we could have talked about this for a week, and there's a lot that could be discussed. But he was just, he was amazing. What y'all are doing is beautiful, and being a part of it is just something I genuinely appreciate.
Well, thank you. And Ed, never apologize for the emotion. I think the world needs a little bit more of that these days.
If you don't have something that you care about, what's the purpose?
There you go.
It's got to be more than biological existence. So the best thing about Elvis Presley is, by God, he made you laugh, he made you cry, but most of all, he made you feel good.
We can't thank you enough, Ed.
Guys, y'all are great. Keep doing what you're doing, because I'm noticing your numbers, but there's a lot of us old Elvis fans appreciating it, and I got the feeling you're going to pull some new folks in that are going to kind of check into what it's all about. So just keep doing what you're doing.